too. You know, it's kind of cool when it's cloudy. I actually think it's cooler in a way when it's cloudy. There is something to the beam with the moon in the background. I've seen those pictures. But last night, there was an angle of the beam that went up, and the clouds, I guess, were low or something, but you saw, like, the sky was all purpley from the beam. Mm-hmm. It was actually, like, purpling up some of the clouds.
That's cool.
Which was fantastic. Almost as fantastic as our next guest, insider on the NBA, athletic, senior NBA writer, LeBron James' bestie, the one, the only, from Pleasanton, California, Sam Amick. Good morning, Sam.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are we today?
I don't know how Sam's doing. I know
he's doing great.
Very stressful question. Doing great, Sam. How are you?
Doing fine. Waiting for the old schoolboy, morning school routine. So hopefully that doesn't get in the way here, but we're good. We're good.
We were talking earlier because I think it was either the day of or the day after your last hit with us. And because it was the Lakers Kings game, and you had the LeBron thing, and then LeBron tweeted at you. And whatever I was telling Jason this morning, whatever the context was, whatever. I'm such a dumb idiot. I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh my God, it's so awesome. LeBron's tweeting at Sam. That's so great, Sam Amick. And I know you're like a real journalist and ho-hum and all that, but just to see that was really cool. That must have been a fun morning for you.
I don't know if fun is a word. It was a little surreal. Listen, the guy's got a just absolutely massive online platform. So needless to say, I had to quickly learn all the ins and outs, even more so than before, of how to shut off certain notifications on your phone, because otherwise it was going to melt, basically.
Yeah.
From Laker Nation, going, oh, he checked you. It was fine. Listen, I know we're not going down that road today, but I said on my podcast, it's not hard to read the room. This is not a great time for the rest of the NBA to know that he's pretty frustrated, impatient, whatever you want to say. So he chose to clean it up the next day. That's his prerogative, and that's fine.
And is that just kind of where it was left? Just last follow up on that. Is that just it's all good going forward?
I've talked to the Lakers, talked to his people. I think it's fine. There was just kind of an understanding that, I've said before, this is just sports, so to speak, with like air quotes, but it's politics. And so it's just leverage, especially a month before the trade deadline. My read of it is, it's not great for, if you're Rob Pelinka, Jeannie Buss, and the Lakers, for the rest of the league to feel like, they're getting pressured by their star player. I think that type of stuff comes into play. I think interpersonal dynamics of those relationships come into play, kind of sensitivities. I even think, and I don't blame him, if you're LeBron, and to his defense, he did, give the political answer for 90% of our interview. And at the end, of course, there was that little moment of truth where he said, y'all know what the F needs to be happening.
Right.
Which kind of says it all. But I think as he nears the scoring record, the all-time scoring record, if you're him, you're trying to do whatever you can to not have any of the narrative be negative. You know what I mean? Like, it's about to be a time of great celebration for a guy who's had an incredible career. And I feel like that was probably part of his calculus as well. But to your original question, Dave, it was funny. A lot of, there's a lot of stuff in our lives, you guys know this, like where, it takes a lot for what we do to rise above the level of like people in your life who don't follow basketball noticing.
Right.
So that was the big thing, is like all of a sudden, people who don't typically pay attention are like, man, what the hell is this?
Last thing on that, because I'm always obsessed with this stuff, just schematically, how difficult is it? Because you're not doing radio, you're not doing television, you're writing about this, and this wasn't you and him sitting down in the locker room. This wasn't him at the podium. The way you painted the picture, you're basically doing a walk and talk, and then the money shot of the whole thing was him 20 feet away, as you wrote, yelling back, what the blank needs to be done. How much of a challenge is it, and how hyper aware are you about using descriptives for context and to make sure the tone as best you can gets across to the reader?
Yeah, very much. And I think the thing to that point that I can relate to, or I guess concede, is like part of our job is analysis, right? You guys can relate to that. And I honestly don't general idea that it's like, all right, he clearly pushed back with the idea that patience was waning as a generality, as a general kind of commentary on the entire scope of the conversation. And again, you see it in the interview, but you couldn't hear the tone. Like, he's not wrong about the fact that, that for most of it, it's hard to explain. Like, his answers in writing were very political, very down the middle. What I will share is, like, you saw kind of his wheels turning, and then it was admittedly a very fun conversation. Like, because you could see him processing, like, all right, am I going to pull the curtain back at all? Am I going to pull the curtain? And then eventually, you drop, like you said, the money line. And even that was funny, because I talked to someone just yesterday who was actually in the hallway and about to talk to him, a non-media person. And we were kind of just chuckling over the fact that it was like, there was nothing discreet about it. There was, 6 or 7 or 8 people in the hallway that quote got kind of, shouted over. And I loved it, because that's what we do, is to try to get these guys we cover to help us understand how they truly see all these different situations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that was there was some truth there. But again, you wake up the next day, I'm sure his phone is blowing up with folks saying, LeBron, you're killing us. We're trying to do this. We're trying to do that, and then you put the political hat on, and then you see what happens from there.
Talking with Sam Amick. Again, all guests come to you from the Folsom Lake Honda hotline. Folsom Lake Honda, your one-stop Honda shop. Halfway point, Sam's a good way to kind of evaluate the season, the standings, the awards. One that we were talking about earlier was Coach of the Year, and we all mentioned Mike Brown. When you look at that award, where does he rank, and maybe who would be at the top of your list?
Yeah, I mean, Mike's got a very strong case at the moment. Especially, and we've talked every week about how kind of jam-packed the West is, right? So the big if is, like, if you tell me that they finished 4th in the West, then man, that's a really good case. So to me, Mike is in there. I think Jacques Vaughn in Brooklyn is on the short list. I know they're crazy talented, but we know everything that happened there. And really, if you look back and look for moments when things turned around, even though a lot of people, myself included, were critical of the Steve Nash firing at the time, just because it seemed like you were, kind of just moving chairs on the Titanic, so to speak. They've turned it around since Jacques got in there, and he seems to really have an ability to connect with that group. And then to me, and I don't know if I'm leaving anybody out, but Willie Green in New Orleans is another good one. They've had no Zion at times, no Brandon Ingram at times, no CJ McCollum at times, and I think 3rd in the West right now, and a little gap between those top 3 teams and the Kings and the Mavs. So those are a few of the guys to me that are doing really good work on the coaching front.
Where do you put Missoula? That was the other name we mentioned in Boston.
Yeah, he's for sure on the list. I feel like, though, with Joe, for one, you're going to have, this is a weird parallel, but he's going to have to fight like the Luke Walton effect from his Warriors days when Luke took over for Steve Kerr, where it's kind of like, okay, that Celtics group, it seems, almost analogous to those old Warriors groups that granted those Warriors groups had won a championship already, but Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown on down seem like there is a little bit of like they can kind of police themselves type of vibe. But if they have the best record in the league, then I think his case would be very strong.
Sam, in our last minute MVP, I think the race is really good for the league. There's a lot of names there, and I'm sure the second half will end up dictating this. But where would you lean right now?
It's crazy. I talked about this yesterday with some people, and I just never thought I would say this because I do think that voter fatigue is at times a real thing, and I thought I would have it. But to me, it is Nikola Jokic right now. And obviously saying that because just the prospect of him winning 3 in a row is something that I didn't anticipate being comfortable with, but quickly my breakdown there is like the same guy, different landscape than before, where all of a sudden, for people who didn't like him getting it the last couple of years, their contention was that his team just wasn't good enough. And he obviously didn't have his other core players. Well, now he's got those guys. And not only is he arguably playing better than he did last 2 seasons, but they're on top of the West. So their team success matters a lot, but I think Giannis is right there. I think, and he's had a bad couple games, but Luka is right there. It could be 3-4 other guys. It's a really deep race this year, as you guys know.
And that's unanimous. We all thought the same thing. We all picked, the voter fatigue, all that. But in the end, Sam, and we got to go here, but we all picked Jokic too. We were curious as to, you're an actual voter. We were curious as to what you say. And true or false, Sam, when you're voting, you shouldn't think about who won the MVP last year or the year before. In a perfect world, should you?
No, in a perfect world, but you do have an awareness of historical context, and you know that it's Larry Bird, Wilt Chamberlain, 3 MVPs in a row. Those are big time names, and I also think Giannis and Jokic both, their playoff struggles in the past, Giannis before his title, they do kind of make you almost regret your vote sometimes. I know I probably shouldn't admit that, but you do. Like, you want your MVPs that you vote for to show greatness in the playoffs. And Jokic has played well in the playoffs, but they just didn't make much noise. And so, but it's a regular season award, and he's just been a monster. I mean, it's 25-point net rating swing when he's on the floor versus off the floor. I know that's a nerdy stat, but yeah, he's been awesome this year.
Read Sam at The Athletic. Go to theathletic.com or download the app, as so many of us have done, and find out all the stuff. Just find out all the stuff. That's the tagline. That's what it should be. Say hi to the fam. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon, buddy.
Thanks, guys. Be good.
Take care. That was Sam Amick. And honestly, as